Overpaying for anything sucks, especially socks, so why pay $45 for a single pair of grip socks when you can spend less than half? Pure Grip Socks Pro feature our best materials for optimal fit, moisture wicking, and performance at a fair price, just $16.99 a pair at puregripsocks.com.
What are the top 5 most exciting and most anticipated football boot releases of 2022? Well, that's the point of this video. So not only is this video about giving you an idea of what to expect this year in the football boot world, but also whether or not you should wait to buy a new pair of football boots if you're currently on the market, but don't necessarily need them right away. Also, if you've watched any of my last few videos, a lot of you have pointed out that the boot wall is not behind me. I'm in a different place entirely. I did post in the comments, not everybody reads it, but this is a temporary set for COVID-related reasons. Don't worry, I'm fine. People around me are fine. We're just doing this out of precaution. I'll be back in the old set relatively soon. Now, at the time of me recording this video, we have yet to see any pros training in Black Doe prototypes. There's no real leaked information out there. We don't even know if this is a football boot that is going to release in 2022, but given that it's a World Cup year and typically big brands like Adidas will go pretty hard with new boot launches and new product launches, I am hopeful that in 2022 we are going to get a complete redesign for the Copa Sense, where the Sense Plus and especially the Sense Point 1, in my eyes at least, have been fairly disappointing in that why would you pick either of them over other options that are available from Adidas's own competition in the same category? I'm hoping for more leather, maybe a more simple design. Some technology I think is always appreciated and kind of expected in modern day football boots, but I think there is definite room for improvement, and I am very hopeful that this year we'll get a much better Copa than we have right now. A football boot, or I guess in this case a pair of football boots that I'm both really excited about and also kind of worried about, is the replacements for both the X Speed Flow Plus and X Speed Flow Point 1, the speed boot offerings from the Adidas brand. And similar to the Copas, we haven't actually seen any prototypes being worn in training at this point in time. I'm sure we probably will in the near future, and this is also one of those releases that I don't anticipate happening until later in the year, closer to the actual World Cup. But as it is right now, and I guess the reason why I'm a little bit worried is I think what Adidas have achieved in this latest generation of X Speed Flow is just so technically impressive. They're some of the most refined football boots we've ever seen from the brand, and in my opinion, the 2 best speed boots from a technical standpoint that the brand has ever made. So my concern with a new model is how do you improve on what is basically the best thing you've ever done? This is where you run into the issue of change for the sake of change, and my concern here is that they end up changing what is already so good for something that is simply not as good. I believe in Adidas, I trust them to a certain extent, but at the same time, we've seen so many great football boots get replaced by something that's just not as good. Hopefully that's not the case for 2022 and whatever the next generation X is going to be called, but it is number 5 on this list and likely coming out in 2022. Technically, these boots released in December of 2020, but for 2021, we saw 2 different generations of the Puma Future Z in the 1.1 and the 1.2, which, if we're being honest, are pretty much the same football boots with very, very minor surface texturing. Nonetheless, for 2022, I'm expecting Neymar to get a new version of the Future Z, likely the 1.3 if they continue with the naming system that they've been using for the last little while. What I'm anticipating from a Future Z 1.3 is some refinement of that midfoot securing system, which has more to do with fit than actual lockdown and responsiveness. Perhaps they can add some of those elements into this new system. And honestly, I'm looking for a football boot that maybe does have some more refinement to it. The Future Z is a football boot that I was more impressed with at the beginning than I am at this point in time, given all the new football boots that have come out since those were initially released. It's not to say that the current Future Z is bad. I think it's very unique in terms of how it fits and feels, and if you like them and love them, there really isn't a better option out there for you. But I think they can definitely make some improvements in regards to overall touch on the ball. The feel of that knitted upper, while decent, I think could definitely be improved. I think the sole plate and stud pattern could be a little bit more aggressive as well, especially if you're gonna have Neymar as your poster boy. I don't necessarily want them to trend into being more of a speed boot, but I feel like what they're marketing in terms of it being focused on agility and rotational movements, it just makes more sense for it to be that way. Also, looking back at past Puma Future models, I just don't like the Future Z quite as much. I think they could be improved, and I'm expecting big things from the next generation this year. Out of Nike's three main lines, their most recent launch has been the Nike Phantom GT2, which came out a couple days after they launched the much more exciting Tiempo Legend 9. And while the GT2 is not old by any means, it was hardly new when it first launched, in that it's the most subtle redesign over what we had from the original Phantom GT, so much so that it's really not a different football boot at all. The experience, fit, feel is completely identical. Nonetheless, we are already seeing pros training in what looks to be the next generation of Phantom GT, likely to be the GT3, and it's a football boot that looks like they are changing quite a bit when compared to what has been on offer from the first two generations. It's tough to say whether or not the upper is still going to be Flyknit. I'm banking on it maintaining its Flyknit feel. I'm also hoping for something that's maybe a little bit softer and slightly more padded, just for the sake of comfort and offering some difference in terms of variation of feel for the ball when compared to the also very thin Mercurial series. You're also going to notice that they seem to have re-implemented the lace cover last seen on the Phantom Vision series, which I think, looking back, was a really underappreciated line of football boots from Nike. So that's something that's both interesting from a feel, but also from a cosmetic perspective, because you can see these look quite a bit different. There's also some flowing lines through the upper, likely some variation of texturing, and you can't make out too much in the way of details in regards to the sole plate and stud pattern, but that looks to be completely redesigned as well. I'm hoping for something that is significantly different than the current Phantom GT. Not to say that they're bad, not to say that they've been bad, but I think there is significant room for improvement, and from a technical standpoint, something that we kind of have high standards for when it comes to football boots from Nike, they're somewhat unimpressive. I'm hoping to be much more impressed by this next generation GT3. While the true return of the Adidas Predator was back in 2018, I would say its true revival wasn't until 2020 with the Predator 20 Plus Mutator, the introduction of demon skin spikes scattered across the upper. Since then, the core design of the Predator hasn't really changed all that much with the current generation Predator Freak. I think they're solid boots overall, but there is definite room for improvement in regards to the feel of the upper, the overall shape of the football boots. The comfort, in my opinion, could be better. And I think there's a lot of people that are kind of just sick of the whole spiky upper design, which is why in 2022, and we've been seeing pros training in prototypes for quite some time now, there is a new Predator model, and it looks to be a completely different design philosophy when compared to what they've been doing for the last couple generations. You're still going to have rubber striking elements scattered across the entire upper, but it looks to be trending back towards kind of the Predator LZ and Predator Instinct days, which are some of my all-time favorite boots, really underrated Predator models, and I'm excited to see what they can do all these years later with similar design ideas. Difficult to say what the upper is going to be made out of, likely still some kind of a prime knit base. I'm hoping for something that's a little bit softer, and if we continue to dream, Predator fans, maybe we'll get a kangaroo leather upper variation as well. Hoping for some more aggressive stud pattern and sole plate options, more along the lines of early Predator models versus kind of the same generic layout we're so used to seeing from the Adidas brand basically over the last, 11 or 12 years. That TRX stud pattern making a comeback, while I'm doubtful, would be something very, very cool to see. But in general, a new Predator model is something that I'm always excited for. And with the amount of rubber striking elements on the surface and the pattern at which they are scattered on the upper, it leads me to believe that this is a football boot that's going to provide a fit, feel, and experience unlike anything else, which is always super exciting. Is there anything more exciting than a new Nike Mercurial launch? The answer to that question is no. And for 2022, we are definitely going to see the next generation of Superfly, likely to be called the Superfly 9, and the next generation of Vapor, likely to be called the Vapor 15. Whether or not the Superfly and the Vapor will become two different football boots again, that remains to be seen, but we have seen pros like Kylian Mbappe training in the next generation Superfly, and it's pretty clear to see that there are some significant changes coming from the last several generations of Mercurial. Tough to tell what's going on with the upper and what exactly it's made out of. The mid-cut design of the Superfly will be maintained, but you can pretty clearly see that the sole plate end stud pattern has undergone a complete redesign, and I think the hope that a lot of people have, including myself, is A, the potential for the return of carbon fiber, and B, the potential for the implementation of Nike's Air Zoom technology, something we have seen on football boots before, but in a much more modern implementation, and something that Nike was touting as this game-changing technology in football boots when back in 2020, they unveiled the Air Zoom Mercurial concept football boot that never ended up seeing the light of day. That technology, in combination with carbon fiber, I think could make for a very exciting product and potentially something that from a performance standpoint actually improves your performance, something we rarely see in football boot technology. So for those reasons, in 2022, the Nike Mercurial has to be the most anticipated football boot.